The file begins. The golden age did not end on the football field. It plummeted into the abyss of digital oblivion. On that March day, pause in 2026, when the crypto market collapsed with the same ruthless force as the Patriots once did in the final seconds of a game, few understood the true scale of the catastrophe. But for Tom Bрэdi, it was not merely a graph's descent, it was a verdict. His empire, built on a myth of invincibility, on a belief in infallibility, began to crumble. The first cracks appeared in assets linked to the Web3 platform. Millions invested in a digital future evaporated faster than morning dew under the Florida sun. The public, accustomed to seeing him as a victor, initially disbelieved. How could a man who had so long avoided defeat make such a monumental error? Internal audits conducted in haste revealed his personal losses from the market's demise exceeded $30 million. This figure became the first nail in the coffin of his financial legacy. It was whispered quietly in the corridors, but its echo resonated through every newsfeed. The anatomy of his fall commenced. Every step, every decision, every endorsement deal now scrutinized under a microscope. The scent of fresh printer ink was replaced by the smell of burning. This was the genesis of public shame, the beginning of an inventory of sins, previously hidden behind the gleam of rings and advertising smiles. The silence that followed the sudden blow was deafening. The media meat grinder engaged instantly. Every channel, every headline screamed about the legend's fatal error. Photographs of Bрэdi, recently associated with triumph, were now accompanied by scathing commentaries and graphs of decline. The crowd that once idolized him now demanded answers, and not just from him. His business partners, investors in TB12 Sports, Bрэdi Brand, even in Katina Labs, felt the wave of distrust. Pause. The Consejo Group, of which he was a partner, faced questions about its reputation. He attempted to respond. A clumsy statement through representatives only fueled the fire. "I always believed in innovation," a phrase that now sounded like a bitter testament. It convinced no one. His public image, so meticulously crafted for decades, began to flake away like old plaster. He was abandoned. First, the smaller endorsement deals, then the larger ones. Phone calls became less frequent. The shadow of the bunker he had built for himself from fame and success now transformed into a prison. His personal life, already under scrutiny, became the object of even more intense, merciless attention. Rumors of his ex-wife, her new marriage and child, set against his own financial ruin, only amplified the contrast of his isolation. This was not merely a financial collapse. This was an exile. The preparation for the lawsuits, already forming in the shadows, was merely a matter of time. The dirt of gossip clung irrevocably. The dirt of gossip clung irrevocably. Before the dirt, before the whispers, there was concrete, unyielding, forged by an ambition that burned brighter than any stadium lights. His origin was not one of preordained glory, a sixth-round pick, an afterthought in the grand spectacle of professional sport. Yet, within that unremarked frame resided a will of industrial-grade steel. He built an empire, brick by agonizing brick, snap by calculated snap. Each championship ring was not merely a trophy, it was a testament to a singular, almost pathological, drive for perfection. He was the architect of an era, a titan whose shadow stretched across 2 decades. The game, once a brutal contest of brute force, became his meticulously orchestrated symphony. He rewrote the ledger of possibility. His name, Tom Bрэди, became synonymous with victory, a brand of invincibility. He moved through the arena with the cold, precise efficiency of a machine, dismantling defenses, defying time. Pause. This was his legacy, a fortress built not on luck, but on an inventory of relentless effort and an almost inhuman rejection of failure. For years, the world watched, bewildered, as he simply refused to age, refused to yield. He was the ultimate algorithm of success, an anomaly of will. The whispers of his eventual fall were always there, faint, dismissed as heresy. He seemed too grand, too perfect, to ever truly break. But even monuments, however mighty, can find their foundations eroded by unforeseen currents. The same relentless drive, the same insatiable hunger for dominance that built his football empire eventually led him to a new frontier. A landscape not of turf and goalposts, but of algorithms and phantom wealth, cryptocurrency. It arrived not as a fleeting distraction, but as a siren song to a mind accustomed to charting new territories, to bending reality to his will. He saw not mere digital tokens, but a new game, a new ledger to conquer, a chance to expand his legacy beyond the physical realm, to cement his name in the very fabric of the future economy. He had mastered the physical. Now the digital beckoned. The allure was simple: control, independence, and the promise of exponential growth. A familiar tune to a man who had defied linear progression his entire career. It was presented as the ultimate hedge against traditional systems, a path to financial sovereignty, a sophisticated gamble. He approached it with the same meticulous dissection he applied to defensive schemes. Every white paper, every market trend analyzed. This was not recklessness. This was an extension of his calculated ambition, a conviction that he could not only participate but dominate this new, uncharted ocean of capital. It was to be his next great conquest. Pause. His next great conquest, but instead it became his most profound, his most catastrophic miscalculation. A gilded cage built of code. His next great victory, but instead it became his deepest, his most catastrophic miscalculation. A gilded cage built from code. Pause. This cage, as it turned out, had no floor. The collapse of the digital dream was swift, relentless. Class action lawsuits descended like predatory shadows, one after another. Investors, whose fortunes had evaporated, pointed fingers. His name, once synonymous with triumph, now appeared alongside accusations of misrepresentation and promoting unregistered securities. This was not just a financial loss. This was Pause the Anatomy of a Fall, a public dissection of a carefully constructed reputation. Every legal filing, every complaint lodged, a new blow to the foundation of his legacy. The plaintiff's attorneys, sparing no words, painted a picture not of a mere unlucky investor, but of an influential figure who had leveraged his authority to draw the masses into a patently risky scheme. The face that once embodied trustworthiness, now seen as a billboard, crumbling under the weight of lies. Bailiffs knocked on doors, bringing subpoenas. The smile on old posters seemed like a mockery. This was the beginning of the end of his invincibility, the first nail in the lid of the digital coffin. But the initial lawsuits were merely the first tremors. The true seismic event began when the investigation unearthed fragments of communication, internal memos, and ledger entries, previously hidden in the labyrinthine depths of offshore structures. These documents painted a different picture, far more complex and unsettling than a simple celebrity endorsement. They spoke of a deep, almost fanatical involvement, of backroom deals, of compensation that reached far beyond public declarations. Pause. This was an inventory of sins. Suddenly it became clear. His role was not passive. He was not just the face of the company, but an active architect whose decisions impacted every stage of development, every risky gambit. Emails, salvaged from scorched servers, revealed impatience, a lust for aggressive growth, a willful disregard for warnings. His own voice, captured in those lines, became his indictment. This was not just a mistake. It was a fatal error, born of a potent cocktail of ambition and perhaps naivete. His broken destiny now hinged on every word written in shadow. The rot was rising, coating everything that had seemed clean. The rot was rising, coating everything that had seemed clean. The legal machinery, slow and relentless, began its grind. Each subpoena, a fresh crack in the polished facade. Testimonies, dredged from the murky depths of corporate loyalty and broken trust, painted a portrait not of a leader, but of a man consumed. The prosecution's narrative was simple, brutal, a lust for control, an insatiable appetite for expansion that blurred the lines between ambition and recklessness. Witnesses, once beneficiaries of his golden touch, now stood under oath, their words like tiny hammers, chipping away at the monument of his public image. One particularly damning exchange, concerning undisclosed holdings and aggressive market manipulations, left the air in the courtroom thick with a different kind of silence. Not reverence, but revulsion. His defense, meticulously crafted, seemed to falter under the weight of his own recorded demands. The digital breadcrumbs, scattered across servers and encrypted chats, formed an undeniable path. A path leading directly to a moment's pause, fatal error in judgment. The public, an unseen jury, watched, their perception of his once unassailable character slowly morphing into something colder, harder. This was the anatomy of a fall, played out in excruciating detail, a prelude to his moment's pause, crippled destiny. The gavel's final strike in May 2025 offered a hollow echo of victory. Acquitted. The verdict, delivered in a monotone, should have been a release. Instead, it felt like an administrative formality, a legal technicality, not a cleansing. The public, who had consumed every damning detail, every leaked email, every whispered testimony, had already rendered its own far more potent judgment. The financial bleed, started long before the court's decision, continued unabated. Key investors, once eager to align with his aura, quietly distanced themselves. The sheen of invincibility, a currency more valuable than any dollar figure, was gone. Even as he pivoted to the broadcasting booth, a shadow followed. His voice, now analyzing plays, carried the subtle, almost imperceptible tremor of a man who had faced the abyss. The ownership stakes, the burgeoning brand empire, the advisory roles, all were now viewed through a lens of suspicion. The name Bрэdi, once synonymous with triumph, now evoked a quiet question mark. The pause curse of public shame, a silent, pervasive poison, had settled deep. It was a scar, invisible to the law, but glaringly apparent to anyone who dared to look. This was not merely the cost of doing business. This was the pause's bitter testament of an empire, built on sand, now eroded by the relentless tide of public scrutiny. His voice, once booming across stadiums, now echoed in the studio's silence. Game analysis, familiar patterns. But behind every word, every perfectly calibrated gesture, lay a hint of something else. Inevitability. Yes, he sat in the commentator's chair, his name still opening any door. But this was a different plane of existence. Like a gilded cage, encrusted with contracts worth $375 million. Public attention, once the fuel for his triumphs, had become a heavy chain. Every step, every glance, every barely perceptible reaction, all under scrutiny. There was no longer just Tommy. Only Tom Bрэди, an object of constant surveillance. His drive for new ventures, from goat gummies to card vault, seemed less an expansion and more a desperate attempt to fill an inner void, to drown out the echoes. Or perhaps it was just a way to prove to himself the empire still stood. His personal life, once sacred, was now part of this endless, brutal show. Rumors of liaisons with influencers, with models. Each name a new headline, another helping of speculation. He said he had no time for personal matters. Perhaps it was the truth, or perhaps it was the only way to hold on to the remnants of his dignity when every breath he took became public property. Meanwhile, somewhere beyond the horizon of his world, another life continued. An ex-wife, a new marriage, a new child. The contrast. Cold, ruthless. He remained alone at the top, surrounded by glitz, but devoid of warmth. And here he is, Tom Bрэdi, a man whose name was synonymous with victory. His journey to the flag football field in Riyadh is not just a game. It was a pause final dance, an attempt to reclaim something lost. Perhaps the pure joy of the game. Perhaps something more. It was the anatomy of a fall, broken down to its molecules. An inventory of sins, a list that included not only financial adventures, but also the relentless march of time which had altered his self-perception. His idea to bring the Patriot way to the Raiders was not just a business decision. It was a bitter testament, an attempt to impose the past on a future that had already rejected it. His legacy is not just 7 championship rings. It is also the wreckage of an empire built on reputation, then partially destroyed by desire. The final verdict was not rendered by a court, but by society, which, as we know, does not forgive its gods their mistakes. And even if he takes the field at the Olympic Stadium in Los Angeles, it will be but a shadow of his former greatness. The digital coffin he built for himself proved far more durable than a physical one. Billions, power, influence, all of it turned out to be mere set dressing. Beneath it, a man whose fate had been scarred, but not definitively broken. He kept moving, forward, into the void, leaving behind only a long shadow and the question, what is the price of eternal glory, when its radiance fades, leaving behind only cold ash?